My name is Joel Skett, and I'm delighted to be joined by Scott McIntosh to once again talk about the Scottish Premiership league leaders, Heart of Midlothian. Scott, how are you?
Yeah, very well. I've actually just finished listening to the video that you put out there yesterday with all the financial sort of information. Found that to be very enlightening. Definitely helped quash any potential fears you've got whenever you read these things and you maybe don't have much of a business acumen. The only downside I would say is you didn't get any of the experts for Hibs.net on. I would have appreciated one or two of those guys on, because look, those guys have been telling us for a while what's been going on at the club. So apart from that, it was all good. Really good listen.
Now, yeah, when the accounts came out on Wednesday, I was considering, like, do I go to Hibs.net to get my insight on the Hearts accounts, or do I reach out to Kieran Maguire? And I weighed up for a while, and I went, you know what? Let's see what Kieran Maguire says, and Hibs.net can be a nice wee backup, just in case. But I found, like, I was writing when I was preparing for it, I was writing my questions, and I was like, when I was writing the kind of down and what I was going to ask was like, am I looking for the negatives here? Because it was you read, you see like the different losses and the questions you get asked, and then so I was a wee bit apprehensive as to what I was actually going to hear from Kieran. I gave him an idea of the topics, and then when we started speaking, and then he spoke quite positively, and I quite like the fact that he spoke, while he's had obviously his finance expert head on, he spoke like a football fan, and like how football fans should want their team to be run. So yeah, it was I found it, like you said, really enlightening, and I think hopefully everyone else took stuff from it as well, because it's all well and good one of us like looking through the accounts and trying to make head or tails of it, but I'm no financial expert, just like everyone else on Hibs.net is. Whereas Kieran is actually a financial expert.
I tend to find that the yearly sort of concern is always around the misunderstanding around the benefactors' contribution and when that comes into play. And I think what the fans need to get round their head is this is factored into the budget, rather than, and I know clubs have done this in the past. I remember watching Sunderland Till I Die, and I think one of the chief concerns amongst people when they came into Sunderland was that Ellis Short had basically just been signing off checks on a month-to-month basis when the losses were being recorded. Now, that isn't happening at Hearts. It's not a case where we say to James Anderson with our begging bowl every year, oh, by the way, James, you need to give us 5 or 6 million this year to cover the losses. James Anderson makes a contribution every year, and then we factor our budgets according to that. And I think that's something that, first of all, isn't just exclusive to Hearts. That's how a lot of clubs operate in football. And I think secondly, it's just something that the fans just need to get their head around. I wouldn't worry about that aspect to it, because I think that tends to be the main worry every season when the accounts get published, is around this benefactor contribution. But that's not something I think anyone needs to worry about at this stage.
Especially after you do, like, I think it was maybe, 12 months ago, and like you heard rumours like, oh, how long is James Anderson going to continue putting money into Hearts so little return in terms of on-field success? But then you read Ewan Murray's excellent piece in The Guardian recently, and he spoke to James Anderson, and some of the stuff that James Anderson said, some of his quotes was very much in keeping with, I'm here for, like, almost like I'm here for the long haul, or I'm here because he's been, reinvigorated by what Jamestown and Tony Bloom have brought to the club. So I think people can take a hell of a lot of comfort from that, and also the fact that we're in a new era now where we operate with Jamestown. And again, I always go back to Union Saint-Gilloise, and you look at their player trading; they've been making profits every single year on their players. So there's two elements where you've got the consistency of James Anderson, and he's kind of talked about his continued contribution to just continue with Hearts and supporting them, and also the fact that the player trading model is just going to improve and improve.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it was really good listen. Really enjoyed it.
Good. Well, hopefully everyone else took something away from it. This episode or show, we're going to preview the Dundee United game on Sunday. But before we get to that, I'm going to pose Scott some questions. Sent him some questions earlier on, and please let us know your answers in the comments, whether you're watching live or when you're watching us back. We do look at the YouTube comments from each video and try and respond where and when we can. So first of all, in terms of the questions are around the reflection of the first 11 games, because the Dundee United game is going to be the start of the second round of fixtures on Sunday. So in terms of the first round of fixtures, Scott, first one was who would you see as your best player?
Yeah, I think Cammy Devlin. I think in terms of consistency across those 11 league games, I think Cammy Devlin's been the most consistent, and not just the most consistent, but then he's been a standout in the majority of those games as well. So I think he's very clear ahead. I think there's other players that have been match winners and have had very big contributions as well. But I would say in terms of someone, you even look at that Motherwell game as an example where the team struggled for 60 minutes. I would even say Cammy was doing okay even in that game, even although the team were struggling for that opening 60 minutes. So yeah, I would say he's streets ahead of the rest of the team just now in terms of contribution over those 11 games.
On top of what you said, and I certainly can't disagree. I think he's been tremendous, and Derek McInnes values him very, very highly. On top of that is the last, I think 3 of the last 4 games I've written about Benny Beningame and how good he has been in the middle of the pitch, but it's like it's because it's almost like it got to the point where Cammy Devlin, you're just kind of expecting that performance of Cammy Devlin. He's going to be an integral part of that midfield, and you're kind of just you know that you're going to get at least a 7, 8 out of 10 performance from Cammy Devlin, and that's what it's been on a consistent basis. Got a piece hopefully coming out next week about Cammy and Benny and their evolution, or just the kind of maybe not evolution or improvement, but how they've adapted to what Derek McInnes has asked of them, and they've got some insight from I spoke to Derek McInnes earlier this week, insight on that. On top of that, and looking at like the staffing I mentioned before, the stats and the matches up with the eye test, and that they're being a lot more positive with possession. I think you've seen that, and you're seeing 2 really good sides to Cammy Devlin's game, because I still maintain he's the best, pound for pound, the best defensive midfielder in the league, on top of being good on the ball.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think there's been times this season, I think if you look at the Aberdeen game, the first day of the league campaign, he had to play as that sort of mature, responsible number 6. He didn't have Benny alongside him in that game. He was playing alongside Spittle and McAtee, and that was probably one of the most sort of impressive performances I've seen him put in. So he has slightly changed his game, because there has been obviously under Naismith in that there was attempts to try and change his style and play him as a more advanced sort of midfielder, at least a sort of number 8. But I think him and Benny have done really well. And again, it helps them that they now have those options ahead of them. That I think some of the issues that were being aimed at Benny and Cammy in the past was around not being progressive enough with the ball. But I think that should have been highlighted more as a problem further upfield and not having those options to take that pressure off them. Now, because we're a lot more adept at playing direct and switching the ball a lot quicker, those sorts of issues that have appeared before with Cammy and Devi don't seem to be surfacing as much this season.
Yeah, 100%, and that echoes what James Govan said. Always thought Benny and Cammy together don't give us enough going forward, but now we have forward players who take the burden off the centre midfielders, and that's it. Big thing is, you hear McInnes talk about playing with 2 strikers and engaging those 2 strikers. Benny and Cammy now have 2 strikers to hit, as well as Kazaridis, and then whoever plays on the right-hand side. Glenn notes Kazaridis for me for player of the month. Well, we'll take it as player of the first round. So fun to watch. Now, second one, Scott, is what's been the most pleasing aspect of the first round of fixtures for you?
I would say the fact that we've won games in a manner of different ways. That I know that the formation side of it settled down over the last 5 or 6 fixtures. We do seem to be sticking with the 4-2-4, and I think that's worked for us on the most part. But I think it's been interesting to see how we've won games. So we've had your comfortable victories, your statement victories, as you might call them, like home to Dundee, home to Falkirk. They were more sort of easier sort of fixtures for us. We've then had our last minute winners in tight games against the likes of Livingston and Hibs. But then we've had games where we've had to adapt within the game itself. And Celtic's a good example of that. Celtic had a good spell or a good chunk of that first half where they were sort of in control after, calling us back to one each. But McInnes was able to make just a slight tweak, just sort of pulling Braga back into a more sort of central midfield position. It didn't negate us going forward because he's got the legs and the pace to sort of still be able to support and run beyond Shanklin, like you see for the penalty that we got given. But it just negated that threat and control that McGregor had been showing in the first half. So I think there's a few examples like that. If you see how we sort of changed formation at halftime against Livingston, bringing in Kazanides, how we've reacted to other teams' changes at home to Aberdeen's a good example of that, where Aberdeen had a 10-15 minute spell in the second half, and I felt like we responded to that well and actually saw out that game comfortably. So that's what's really impressed me. It's the fact that we're winning games a number of different ways. We're not one-dimensional in terms of what we can offer as a team, and we've got match winners throughout the squad as well. So again, that bodes well, not just for what we've shown so far, but what we can potentially do over the next couple of rounds of fixtures as well.
Yeah, Stu says, nice to have a manager that can actually change things during games, and he does that as well, where when he realises he's got stuff wrong, whether it is if things maybe not quite going the way he did it at St Mirren, Livy, Dundee United, and things, I don't think he got it wrong. It just didn't. I would have played Aaron Forrest wing back, but it just didn't work at that point in time. Givaldo says the fitness and the way the players look to be loving playing for Hearts is a massive positive compared to just a few months ago. And Finn says most pleasing thing is we always look like we're capable of scoring, and that's a big thing. That's probably the thing that stood out for me is when you look at the league table, the number of goals, the most goals we scored after 11 games in the top flight since I think 64-65, and it's the goal difference. That is a very Old Firm goal difference, because even when you see teams who have started well outside Old Firm, their goal difference is never really that. Like it's obviously positive, but not as kind of dominant as that. Whereas Hearts is very much what you'd expect from a team who are 9 points clear at the top of the league.
And it's the equivalent of an extra point, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Talk about the ground that Celtic and Rangers need to cover on us. We're 14 points ahead of Rangers just now, but you could call it 15 points, essentially, based on the goal difference that we've got. Same as Celtic. That's more like 10 points, given the goal difference. So it does, and again, like Finn's saying there, we always look like scoring. And that's why if we go a goal down or a team peg us back, St Mirren's a good example of that, you felt like within the stands, there's an acceptance and there's an understanding, there's a trust there that's been built pretty quickly that we can come back from this, and we can either come back to peg the other team back or even go on to win the game. So yeah, I think people are quite right to raise this. It's been one of many things that have been really pleasing about the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing was, before we move on, is that you mentioned the word trust, and that's a big thing, because there was absolutely no trust in that team at the end of that. It picked up at the end of the season under Liam Fox when he went back to playing kind of how Hearts should play, but there was almost a lot of making up to do. But they've certainly done that, and that's a big thing with McInnes. Has mentioned that quite a lot. It's about the trust is building, and he wants the fans to trust the players and stick with them. The third question. What was the third question? Oh yeah, what's been the biggest surprise so far across these 11 games?
I probably need to highlight a player, and it goes to something that I'd observed at the start of the season when I'd watched Kazanides in terms of the scouting tapes before he came into the club. I have to be completely honest that Chesnikov and Kurjota were 2 players that I had higher hopes for, or were at least more excited to see. I think I then watched him in a couple of the League Cup games, and I thought, okay, he's contributing. He looks like he can bring goals. He was attacking the back post really well, which was something that I was very high on our new players doing, because it's something that we've suffered with in the past with the likes of Barry Mackay. But I still thought, I'm not quite sure about his decision making. I think he's going to be someone who is going to delight but also frustrate equally. And there'll be spells in games where I'll be not too hot on his decision making. I have to admit, he's been really good in that. in that respect. And that's been one of the most pleasing aspects of him. He's a great wide player. You know, the way he runs at players is really good. It's really positive to see. He's obviously popped up with some assists. He's scored some great goals. But actually, it's his decision-making. He's really good in tight spaces. And our third goal against Dundee last week's a really good example of that. He gets the ball in a really good area, but he lays it off to Spittle really quickly. He doesn't. A lot of wide men would take that ball, their head would be down, and they'd be looking at how they can maybe beat one or two players. But if he sees a player in a better position than him, he'll play that ball off. And he's done that on a few occasions. If you think he's some of the assists, an assist against Kilmarnock where he lays the ball off to Braga, where he could easily have had a shot on his own. He's done it once or twice with Shanklin in home fixtures as well, where he's managed to roll the ball along. And that's been a really big surprise, is A, how consistent he's been, but B, I would say his decision-making has been a lot better than I had probably assumed, having watched him initially for the first couple of League Cup games. So that's been a really good and pleasant surprise for me.
He's just, like, watching him, he just oozes class. The way he takes up, like, if there's a crossfield ball or a pass fired into him, you just know he's going to take it dead. And that is a massive, that's for a winger, that's huge, because that allows him to just go, bang, I've got control. I know what I'm doing next, or I can have a look at what I'm doing next. Or it's a case of taking a touch and he is away. He's going to take on a fullback. I like his balance. I like the way he stops and starts, and also like the way he can stop, checking his right foot. And he sometimes just these clip balls over to Braga, maybe run into space, or Shanklin, and it just adds a different dimension to the Hearts attack, which is great. There was a moment you talked about in tight spaces, a moment on Saturday against Dundee where it's like he was right up against the touchline. It's like, how are you getting out of this? And he manages to wriggle his way out of it. And then later on in the game, he was sprinting across the pitch to close down after Dundee had won the ball back. And then you see McInnes was absolutely delighted with him. He was applauding it, and then he would shout across onto the pitch and tell him well done. So he's just been he's been a revelation. He just looks get better and better. And I would urge anyone who is in the ground early to just get in there for his shooting. His shooting is unreal.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've done at Kilmarnock recently. Because I have to, if I'm honest, when it's home games, I tend to sort of get in the ground maybe 10, 15 minutes after the game kicking off. But recent away fixtures, I've been making a point of sort of getting in there half an hour, 45 minutes. And I would agree, he's finishing. And this is where you see that the goals he has scored so far, they're not a fluke. And I would be shocked if he doesn't hit 10 goals come the end of the season. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't hit 20 goal contributions either. He's well on his way to hitting those sorts of targets. Oh,
100%. Absolutely. Craig mentioned that. Coming out, which game was it? Coming out, not the Dundee game, there was maybe one a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, he's on his way to, he used a basketball term, a double-double, in terms of 10 goals, 10 assists. So, big surprise if he doesn't make it there. Fourth and final question before we get on to the Dundee United game. Is there any area that you're like, I don't say room for, like, there's always room for improvement, but there's not been like a major area that, like, oh, that's a worry. But is there any area that you think or something they're like you'd like to see improved on?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the club are aware of the issues we've had down the right-hand side. So I feel like there's no point raising that one, because Chesnikov's on his way. I think McAtee has done well in that position. And I think right back, if it's not something they're looking at for January, I'm fairly confident the club will be looking at that area for next summer. I would say it's those little pockets of space. And to be fair to Shanklin's filling that position well. If you look at the goal he scores against Dundee, he does really well to find space in between their two banks of five in that first half, which was hard for the... And this is where I get really annoyed when people raise concerns about XG around Lauren Shanklin. There's a guy in particular that does Celtic podcasts that constantly berates Lauren Shanklin's XG.
Yeah.
And I keep having to remind him that low XG is because he is doing what Celtic forwards don't do just now, and finds pockets of space against low blocks. That actually should be highlighted as a positive of his in-game intelligence. But what I would like to see us sort of evolve into, and this is possibly going to include as you coming into the team, or maybe capturing another player further down the line, is that I would like to see someone making those runs from midfield and finding that gap, rather than it always having to be Shanklin coming deep. Ultimately, we wanted to re-sign Lauren Shanklin because we want him in the box for cross balls, and that's ultimately still an area where I'd still like to see more of him in. I'm being a bit greedy here because he's doing really well. The club are doing really well. But yeah, that's probably something I've noticed. I think the Hibs game highlighted that. I think we've talked about, Benny and Cammy and how much they've done well this season, but I still feel like a ball carrier for midfield would still be good in certain fixtures. I think when teams are deciding to sit in, I think having a ball carrier or someone who can at least exploit those little pockets of space. I think as you've shown that, he showed that in that 20-minute spell against Livingston with some of the positions that he found there, even just not coming from central, but maybe playing just in off the left, maybe similar to what we asked Spittle to do against Dundee. That's maybe the position he will come in and take up just now. It might be that sort of coming in off the left rather than playing centrally for midfield. But look, splitting hairs there when I'm trying. Like, everyone's doing really well. I think the club are in a position now in terms of the player trading model that they'll be well aware what needs to be addressed and how quickly that needs to be done. So I feel like that's not something we don't need to labour that point too much now. Moving forward.
I'm trying to find there's a goal scored. Where is it? Sorry, I can't find it on Transfermarkt.
I didn't want to go down a rabbit hole with XG. It just annoys me when people talk about that in a disparaging way. It's like, Messi outperformed his XG. Like, I don't know what sort of point people try to make when they say, oh, he's playing better than he's... I think they're trying to make the point of he'll eventually hit a dry spell, and I think people are maybe aiming at him for last year, but I think there's a lot more context to what happened last season than just talking about the XG part of it.
I think I like XG in terms of using it from a team perspective, because it's almost like showing
like trends for a team.
And like
sample sizes.
Yeah, big, and it's like if you like, you can see if a team are creating good chances or they're not creating good chances, or I think it can tell you a wee bit of a team. But like everything, you need to. It's not the be all or end all. It needs to be used within context and and all help paint a picture. But yes, I'll go individually go back to a striker. Lauren Shanklin is just a very good finisher, so he's always going to he's going to outperform his XG. So. Yeah, that's I know I know the exact tweet you're. I know the person you're talking about, but there's a tweet over the weekend that was just made.
I raised a tweet a couple of weeks ago about the fallacy XG, and I showed that it was that still the Lyndon Dykes scoring the open goal against Greece and that having an XG 0.66, and I'm like, well, that highlights the issue. And then people came back saying, oh, but a guy was going to slide back and he's not actually right in the middle, and I'm like, he's a fucking professional footballer shooting an open goal for you. It shouldn't matter what angle he's making it for. And I was like, this is where I get annoyed with XG and how it gets used for isolated incidents. I'm like you. I'm quite happy with it picking up on a trend of a team and how they may perform over a season. I think it's being used quite well just now to discuss Hibs and how Hibs will eventually, they will win more than they'll draw, because some of the chances are missing just now over a season. That should sort of even itself out. But in terms of using it for isolated incidents or just looking at one player, I just don't see the value in it. Are you on mute, mate?
I am on mute. Sorry, I forgot it because I was typing away. Stu says it's a very slight nitpick, but I'd like us to start a bit faster, get more goals within the first 15 minutes. That's relevant to the Dundee United discussion coming up. Hearts have only Rangers have scored more goals in the first 15 minutes than Hearts. So Hearts have scored 2 goals in the first 15 minutes. As you say, you can see Hearts finish a game very, very strongly, as we have as we've come to see.
I think that's been an issue in Scotland in general, though. I think somebody was saying that I think there's only been 2 goals scored in the opening 10 minutes in the Scottish Premier League this season. So there was us against Celtic, and there was the Hibs goal at Livingston.
I mean, that could be bang on.
I think there tends to be an issue with teams scoring in the opening 10 minutes just now.
I mean, in terms of the opening 15 minutes, there's been 11 in total. And that's where you compare it to 16 to 30, 31, 31 to 45, 30. And then so there's something about teams in Scotland starting slowly. I hadn't realised that.
I think the intent's been there on the most part. I think the intent's been there to try and get early goals, but it hasn't always quite translated.
Right, before we get to Dundee United preview, Hearts Standard is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV today. With thousands of jobs across Edinburgh and the surrounding area, you'll find the one at S1 Jobs. Start your search today. So Dundee United, Scott, what... I was going to ask you what to expect from them, but I've reached out to a mate who is a Dundee United fan, and he was like, it's hard to know what to expect from Dundee United because it seems like they've got compared to when we last played them, they've got a lot of guys back from injury, but it's almost like with these players at his disposal, Jim Goodwin doesn't really know the identity of his team at the moment, and he is perhaps one of the accusations or criticisms is he bends to the will of the opposition. We've seen that in their last outing against Motherwell. They were very, very passive.
Yeah, it's a really strange one because I think there's a lot more individual talent in that Dundee United squad than a lot of teams in the league. And I think because Dundee's our most recent team that we've played against, you should really be going into this fixture and saying it should be a more difficult fixture. But in fact, in some respects, I think Dundee United will play to our strengths a little bit, especially if they go with their 3-4-3. I think as long as we are showing the intent and the sort of the pace that we've been showing in terms of our intent in home games, I think we turn that 3-4-3 into a 5-4-1 pretty quickly. And again, you're not having to worry like we have done in recent fixtures against Celtic and St Mirren of an overload in the centre of midfield. It should be Cammy and Benny going up against two players in the centre for them. So I think in some respects, what Dundee United are looking to put out there, I think should actually complement us quite well. And I would be quite confident that you'll see a better performance from us in the opening 30 on Sunday to what we got against Dundee last week, because it was all about having to get one or two players to find those little pockets of space because of how Dundee were approaching that game and sort of sitting in and just sort of letting us have the ball. So I'm actually looking forward to this. I think it could be a good game and a very good fixture for us.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 3-4-3. That was something that they played 4-2-3-1. Was it 4-2-3-1 against Motherwell? The expectation is that 3-5-2 doesn't really work for them, and they will go 3-4-3 at Tynecastle. And yeah, like you said, they won't be as. I don't think any team will be as defensive. I think could be lower league sides that come to Tynecastle in the cup and not be as defensive as Dundee.
Yeah, I had sort of flashbacks of Livingston that time they turned up to Tynecastle, that midweek game where I think we only won 1-0, but Livingston literally showed no desire to even have the ball. And to me, that looked like a Dundee side that will get relegated because I just think they're so devoid in their attacking players of any sort of confidence that by the time they get to fixtures that they're going to need to win and come out and try and attempt to win by the end of the season, I just don't see how they're going to do it. I just think he's setting them up to fail. They're not going to be able to defend like they did. And even the Celtic game, they didn't really defend that well. That was more about Celtic's deficiencies than how well Dundee set up against them.
Yeah. And you could understand, I think everyone, a lot of Hearts fans had a laugh at it, but you could understand Simon Murray's frustration.
Afterwards. 100%. That must be a horrible job just now. And that won't just be a Saturday thing. That's manifesting throughout the week. He'll see through training how the team's setting up and he'll be feeling it week to week thinking, I'm not going to get any service. I'm not going to get a bite of action here. So yeah, I can completely understand why he reacted the way he did last week.
So in terms of talking about starting well, Dundee United, they've had a habit of going behind and having to chase a game. They've not had a complete performance this season, certainly in the league, and they've left themselves with a lot to do. So it goes into that fast start element. Scott, what would you make any Changes to the team. So Stu says, same team as last weekend, but Halks for Steiny and Braga for Kabori. Spittle did well in the second half with tucking in from the right, helping out Cammy and Devlin. Well, Malky MCF says, think this is a game to start Borch. If Spittle or Forest start, they have to play on the right and leave Kizzy on the left.
I would bring Halkett back in. I think Halkett's out there just purely to give him that rest. And as much as I really like Steinweider, but Halkett's had a really good start to the season, and I think him and Finlay have been doing really well together, and it'd be good to get that continuity back in terms of that back five. So I would definitely bring Halkett back in. I'm a bit split on whether you bring Braga back in. I think Kabori's done more than enough to warrant getting another start. I think that then raises the possibility of, do you put Kizadidis out wide and you bring Braga in and try and play him out wide? I don't know. You could maybe play Braga left and Kizadidis right, because I do think one of the ways of getting past a 3-4-3 is not allowing them to settle into a 5 and actually getting the ball, switching the play really quickly and getting the ball out to your wide players quite quickly. So maybe there is a case for maybe bringing Braga back in and maybe dropping Spittle. But I wouldn't make too many changes. I definitely wouldn't make too many changes. I don't think that's required at this stage.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said there. That's something, I think that's something that all of us want to see, is the right-hand side, whether it's Kajota or having that fluidity with Braga and Kizarides and Kabori with Shanklin as well. There are a few very intelligent players there, a real blend and mix of talents. I suppose the other question is, I assume you'd leave Harry Milne at left back.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think in terms of what he can offer us, running in for deep, I think he offers us too much, the ability to drop him. He's got that turny pace that Kingsley just doesn't have, unfortunately. And look, I'd feel bad for Spittle if he gets dropped as well, because I thought Spittle came onto a game. And he does give you that option of coming in, and that's the thing. If you play Harry Milne left and you maybe bring Braga into the team, you've then got to make sure that Braga is coming inside and allowing Milne that space to exploit the sort of left flank. So that's something that we need to make sure they're working on during the week. But try to think back to when Braga played that position against Dunfermline earlier on in the season. I feel like that's something he was quite adept at doing, was coming inside and looking for the ball. And he's shown that he could probably play anywhere across that sort of midfield three anyway, behind the front man. So the more I talk about it, the more I'm thinking bringing Braga for Spittle, bringing Halkett for Steinwender, and that would probably be the only two changes. I wouldn't bring in Borchgrevink. I think McAtee's played really well at right back. I think I saw enough from Borchgrevink against Aberdeen to suggest that I am not overly convinced about his defensive capabilities. And to be fair to Dundee United, one of the things that have been quite good this season is, in transition at pace, is hitting teams with that front three. I saw it when they played against Rangers. I saw it when they played at Easter Road. They were really good at that. So I would keep McAtee in there for the time being.
Yeah, not very Jambo. He mentioned, when will McInnes put Borchgrevink in at right back with another winger ahead of him in the 4-4-2 with Milne and Kiz on the left? It seems an obvious choice with Krajota and Chesnikov to come in. Like you, I think I just think there's a preference of McEntee at the moment. I think McInnes, when you look at the profile of players that McInnes likes in his backline, McEntee probably ticks a lot more boxes than Borchgrevink does. I don't think there's any doubt that Borchgrevink is a very, very good football player, but I think you do have to take into account the fact that he was literally signed by under Neil Critchley. So it's not I don't think it's a massive surprise if he is not as involved as others have, and the fact that I think McEntee has been. He's not. I don't think he's a wing back. I think we can agree on that. But he's. But I think he's been really solid and really dependable at right back, and that's all we've kind of been asking for since Michael Smith departed.
He gives you such set plays as well. That's saying it's another threat from set plays. He gets a good head on for Kabori's first goal against Dundee. So yeah, like I say, it's maybe harsh on Borchgrevink, but I've not seen enough of him to suggest that he would complement the rest of that back four as well as McAtee has up to this stage.
Yeah, and just on your Braga, I think when he did, I'm trying to think, was it an interview I listened to him when he was in Norway? He talked about his favourite position. His favourite position was off the left and kind of running in off the left. So, but he's been he's a type of character who can play, who could work out there, and you won't have to question his work ethic. Now, before we finish, I'll just bring in some comments. As James, a few guys have mentioned, 3 in a row for Derek McInnes. When does the curse kick in? Derek McInnes has won the Premiership Manager of the Month for the 3rd time running. Only the 3rd manager to do that in SPFL era. I'll let you have I'll bring in some comments, but I'll let you have a think, Scott, to see if you can name the other 2 managers who have done it in 3 in a row in the top flight. Here we go.
Brendan Rodgers is probably one of them.
No.
God,
no.
That seems mental, considering how far off at Rangers were during most of his time there. Ange,
he was the last one to do it. Did it 3 months in a row at the end of one of the seasons.
I'm actually thinking David Gray maybe won.
David Gray did. He did it. He got one. He did it 2 months in a row, and I think, but in the same season.
I was just thinking because of the 17 games in a row. I thought, well, 3 months. Is it somebody a bit more distant, a bit more far back?
6 years, maybe 6-7 years.
All right.
Stu says Tilleen. No, it's not Tilleen. Stu says Burley, but that's out with the SPFL era. He did it 2 in a row.
Back 6 years. So what? Gerrard?
Nah, 2 in a row as well.
God.
It's not neither Old Firm.
Oh, near Old Firm?
Nah.
Oh, can he be Craig Levine for that start of 2018?
Nah. It's relevant for what's happening in a week on Saturday and then a few days later.
Oh, right. Okay. Steve Clark at Kilmarnock. Right.
Steve Clark at Kilmarnock, yeah.
Wow. 3 months in a row. That's pretty decent.
So technically it was 3 out of 4 months, but they didn't have one for the January because of the winter break.
Right. Okay.
1 out of 3 in a row. Final, some comments. Malky says, having 2 capable wide players, 2 up front and encouraging the fullbacks forward, the emphasis on Cammy and Dev and Benny is working to their strengths. Stu says, attacking players like Kizzy, Braga, Shanks win games, but also tend to have a quiet spell for games. Cammy and Benny, however, have kept their standards extremely high through the 90 minutes. Absolutely no doubt about that. Oh, this was what I was going to ask you, but we're running out of time. So just if you can think off the top of your head, there's a run of games in mid-December where we have Celtic away, St Mirren at home. St Mirren's actually been postponed. Hibs away, Rangers home. I think we'll know by then if we are truly in a title race. So just on the next round of fixtures, which we obviously got 29 points from the first round, what do you think would be a really good return?
Take 10 points out of those 4 games.
Oh, no, in terms of the 12, so the next round of fixture, the next...
Oh, 11. Next round of fixtures.
Yeah.
I would just be trying to replicate what we've done. And we are in a title race.
Oh,
Again, the evidence was there last night. There's nothing to suggest that the competition are going to win 5, 6, 7 games in a row just now. And look, this is all it's a bit of a backhanded compliment to Hearts, because I think this is being deemed as a season where hitting the Old Firm, it's like low-hanging fruit because of how poor they've been. But I would say last night just offered more. It just confirmed what we've all been sensing so far, which is that there is more than a whiff of blood from the rivals just now. And I can't see, there's nothing that can be done with them in the short term to fix the ills that they have with their squad recruitment and just how imbalanced or lacking in squad depth both teams have. And we all know how notoriously difficult January is to fix these types of ills. So I think we are in a title race. And even if 100%. We hit that bump, I haven't seen anything out of this Hearts team to suggest that we are. Everyone's talking about Celtic and Rangers going on winning runs. I don't see how this Hearts team go on a significant losing run. I think we will lose games, of course we will, but I can't see us losing more than 2 in a row this season, just because of the makeup of the squad and what McInnes is getting out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes. You look at 2 sides. As Hearts are actually. It's not as if it's been a case of we're top of the league having, I don't know, won 6 or 7 games or 7 games. Like, it's no matter if Celtic and Rangers were good, we'd still be likely top of that. Would be top of the table after this round of fixtures if they had been competent. Rangers, it's an absolute mess of a situation. Their squad is an absolute mess, and they just look soft.
Poor. And I actually thought, I'll be honest, when Danny Rule came in, I was not I don't think concerned's the right word to use, because I'm never concerned about what those two are doing, but I felt Celtic had bigger problems because I thought Rangers would get their front three sorted. But what Rule has done since coming in is actually dropped Gassama. And he's now trying to get a tune out of playing Chermiti as a sort of target man with somebody playing off him. So actually, Rangers still have the same issues as they had under Russell Martin in terms of being a creative force. He's maybe made them a little bit better in terms of their defensive structure, but as a creative force, they're still offering next to nothing. And Celtic, I mean, I'm not wishing injury on people, but when the young lad Callum Osman got injured last night, again, that takes away another option that Celtic were probably hoping to exploit, at least between now and January. And the other thing to consider is there's going to be departures in January for Celtic. Iheanacho, if he's still there, he'll have AFCON. Balakwisha will have AFCON, and Taneki will have AFCON. So again, the three players that they brought in to try and fix and plug that gap in August are not going to be there for the entirety of January. So there's so many factors as to why we are in a title race. Before you talk about what we've done positively since August, there's so much about those Rangers and Celtic teams that doesn't suggest that there's going to be this quick turnaround over the next few months. I think Celtic will take a while to get a manager in, because I think a manager's going to look at this situation and think, my reputation isn't worth taking this gamble. I think managers will turn round to Celtic, I would imagine, over the next few weeks if they approach anyone and say, I'll take the job, but I'm taking it in the summer. I don't, especially if they've already got a job. If they're unemployed, different conversation potentially. But I think if there's talking McKenna at Ipswich, there's not a chance somebody with his current reputation is going to take that gamble and go, well, I'm not going to come in here and potentially be the first Celtic manager to lose a title to Hearts in the last 40 years. So yeah, I think there's a lot going on at those two clubs. It's going to take a while to fix. So I think even if we do hit a bump, it's not going to be a big enough bump that's going to completely wipe us out of the title race over the next few months.
I don't just think we're in a title race. I would say, again, it's my my.
We are favourites just now.
There we go. I was just going to say we're not just title challengers. Heart and Midlothian are title favourites at the moment, because
I thought I'd join in with you there just so that if this clip gets clipped and put on a Twitter feed in like 6 months' time, it's the two of us and not just on you. I knew when you were doing that.
I'm sure people would be lining up to do that. One last comment. Gamer on Exit Live said, glad that we've abandoned the obsession with wanting to play possession-based tippy-tappy football. Great to see some real aggression in our play. Amen. Scott, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and your comments were excellent. As always, sorry I didn't get around to all of them. Hopefully, everyone has a wonderful weekend, and we'll be back on Sunday to react to, hopefully, another Heart Up Midlothian victory against Dundee United. Be sure to check out heartstandard.co.uk for all your Hearts needs, and be sure to subscribe to YouTube as well. Until the next time, goodbye, and thank you.